Hello. Goal today. Less talking. Less talking, more playing. I, uh, if only because I want to have more opportunities to get individual songs right. Because, part of the difficulty of this whole arrangement is, I want to grow a bunch of different platforms simultaneously. I want to have like a reason to post on the Instagram, but this is also the kind of main thing, right? In some ways, I'm trying to direct everyone to either the streams or to the YouTube channel or something like that. But really, ultimately, the Instagram has been the most successful thing, and so practically speaking, I have to draw some people with that, which means I need to pull from my stream recordings because that's kind of the most efficient way to do this now. It doesn't really make sense for me to set aside a bunch of time to try to really nail a take that just is going to go on Instagram, right? I really need to do it here. I really need to do it live. That's the draw, because then you're pulling people to the stream, right? Because it's a clip from the stream. So goal today is I have a much longer roster of music, some of which should be like pretty immediately recognizable for anyone with any interest in rock music or metal music or whatever. But let's see here. I'm trying to make sure I have everything in my list here. So, oh goodness. Let's see. What do I have here? I have a whole bunch of songs. On the first stream, there was an Opeth suggestion, and then I realized I played no Opeth, and the song that was suggested, as we kind of went over in that stream, I don't actually know. And then I was listening to it the past week or so, because I was like, yeah, I bet I could play it, and I could, but it's like lots of Opeth songs. It's actually a more complicated arrangement than it maybe initially lets on. You think that Opeth is these like 11-minute long songs where every part repeats a dozen times, and so they're actually not that hard. They're all these kind of mid-tempo, usually triplet things or 6/8 things or whatever. But it's actually not true. A lot of them have really like weird tags, weird little parts that are very specific that sound bad if you forget to include them. So there's a great deal of learning to do when you're trying to pick up how those songs are structured and everything. But I do know a bunch of other Opeth, so I figured I might as well play it, particularly because the only Opeth I've ever tried to put on the Instagram is actually the really boring Opeth, which is Face of Melinda, the kind of ballad thing on Still Life, which is a wonderful song, with a wonderful drum part. Actually, it's just that it's relatively simple. It's one of those funny instances of like a rock or metal player getting jazzy, where they usually sound awful. Like, I mean, I sound pretty awful playing like straight ahead jazz or whatever, because I haven't practiced enough to really have the touch for it. You know what I mean? You really need to like stew in that atmosphere for a really long time to have the feel down, it seems to me. And literally the way that he makes the majority of that song jazzy is that the opening sort of quiet sections, which are kind of the majority of the song, he just plays like a basic rock groove, but he plays it like really softly, like he feathers the bass drum really softly rather than like slamming on it, and then he uses brushes, but he's still just playing a rock beat, so it's not like he's doing like the, the sort of, jazz techniques. It's not like he's taking the brushes and like, you know um, like doing the stirring the pot thing, you know. He's not going like right, right, and then like keeping time with the feet. There's nothing like that really happening. He's just playing a rock groove, which of course I can't even really replicate on the electronic kit anyway, because it sounds like, I can hit this with my hand and it still sounds like I'm hitting it with like a wooden stick or something like that. So, I mostly did it just because the final part is really fun, which is just like this kick-ass, slowed down groove. But it's really simple. I think it's effectively, the vast majority of it is just this. Still can't choke that cymbal. Um, yeah, I think that's effectively how the end of the song goes. It's a kind of mid-tempo, just like basic rock thing, and I mean it's very dramatic and it's very sort of emotional sounding and stuff. But it's not it's not the most like, Instagram style, just like flashy, you know, uh, like I think the look of all the drumming on Instagram is very important because it's like everyone who's on Instagram is like someone from kind of the millennial to the Zoomer age, and they all want everything to look like a really cool, I don't know, like a Marvel movie or something. So like all of the playing is like highly visual. I don't think we talked about it before, but the only person who actually blends those in a way that I think is actually like cool is Eloy, because he's playing like crazy metal stuff, and then he's really emotive when he's playing, and he really like puts a lot of like oomph into his playing. But then he also is, you know, not really playing like traditional metal parts. He's playing a lot of weird, almost like he sounds like if he wasn't hitting so hard, the parts almost sound like, you know, Vinnie Colaiuta or something like that. I mean, some really great like heritage drummer of some kind. Um, but yeah, besides him and maybe like there's a slightly younger guy I think named David Cola, whose playing is really cool, and he's kind of in that like Instagram drummer world, but his playing is genuinely great enough that he sort of like earned it. Um, and then with everyone else, it's just this kind of like tasteless thing where you go from like just like you're just ripping some insane linear pattern for 45 seconds, and then you transition into like a weird like modern like hip hop, like a Dilla beat, intentionally out of time sounding thing, and the contrast between these two things just like blows people's minds and makes them go crazy, you know. So you you have just people playing like insanely fast like singles and doubles right, to a metronome, and you know, it sounds really impressive, and then they're transitioning into like this like weird backbeat thing, and people are just like endlessly impressed by this, you know. You know, that's a kind of bad imitation, because that's not like a, usually these people aren't even like improv soloing. They usually have like a sort of set of licks that they've effectively charted out, so it's not even really improvised, really, you know. um, and of course there's like some cool like rudimental things in there, like besides just like single stroke rolls and doubles, but like it's basically just used as a way to like transition between really fast sets of singles and doubles anyway, you know. It's just it's not the most impressive thing in the world. I keep thinking about this with some of the rudiments that get really popular on social media. We talked about this a little bit, like the prominence of the six stroke roll in everyone's playing now is really kind of odd, because you know, the six stroke roll is almost like in a sort of classic, really great pop music context, the six stroke roll is almost never played like in isolation. Basically, you play it once at the beginning of a phrase, and it's usually never actually played as six strokes. People play it as a seven stroke roll normally. So again, I'll just go over the sticking to show you what I mean, but then I'll show you what I mean by it's a seven stroke roll typically. So this is the basic sticking of a six stroke roll. It's, if you're a right-handed person, it would be right, left, left, right, right, left. Now, that might sound like weirdly sort of schematic and not that like interesting, But the thing to remember here is that the way it's often played is in the context of basically like things that you would instantly recognize in a pop context. So basically, the six-stroke roll became the foundation for the most famous way to really like bring the percussion back into a song, right? It's all over. I think it's all over even like Fleetwood Mac and stuff like that, which is if you were to just mouth it, it sounds like doom da gat doom boom gat boom gat. It's that thing at the start. Doom da gat doom. That's all it is. But the thing is that that's played as 7 strokes, not 6, because you need one more note to get to that second downbeat. Doom da gat. Right. So that's actually almost never was there just like a 6-stroke roll being played in like a pop music context, right? It was played instead like this. So that's the sound. That's the sound that you would instantly recognize in a lot of pop music. This thing. That's all over the place in like most pop music of an older generation, and then sometimes it would be played as a 5-stroke roll. So instead of it being super dense with triplets, you would just slow it down and play it as like 8th notes or 16th notes, whatever subdivision you want to put it as. So instead of I'll play option 1, which is the 6-stroke roll, or the 7-stroke roll rather, and then I'll play it as the less dense version. And so basically that sound defined a lot of the really great catchy drum fills of like pop music in the 20th century. And the funny thing is that that use of it seems to have almost completely gone by the wayside in the way that people play for Instagram now, right? Which is that the 6-stroke roll is just like it's just like this rational chunk. It's just this unit of math that allows you to play sextuplets really quickly, because not everyone's a metal drummer, and so not everyone feels totally comfortable just blasting out full velocity single stroke rolls. And so it allows people who have a more delicate touch or whatever to get up to really fast speeds. And it's just played as a 6-stroke roll. It's not played as like a fill. It's played as like a soloing motif, right? And so it's like, yeah, that sounds cool. It's also not like, the most musical way to apply it. You know what I mean? And so a lot of like Instagram rudiments have this weird quality, which is, like I said, it's just complexity for the sake of basically like impressing the, like, my new favorite term, the midwits. It's just to impress the midwits, right? Because basically, if you pay attention to what that is, essentially, if you were to remove the sticking from it, right, left, left, right, right, left, and just present it as a series of notes, and it was unclear what hands you were meant to play this rudiment on, and you just looked at basically the accent pattern and how it sounds, right? How is it different than any other sticking of 6 notes, right? Well, one of my favorite rudiments, the paradiddle diddle, it has a much different sound than the paradiddle diddle, right? Which is also a sequence of 6 notes, but with the sticking's different, right? So a paradiddle diddle just played in a phrase doesn't sound like a 6-stroke roll. It sounds totally different. In fact, if anything, the paradiddle diddle has this weird thing, which is that it actually has kind of within it something like the accent pattern that you associate with like the jazz ride. So like if you start with a tag of a couple extra notes on the start of the paradiddle diddle, and then you settle into it, and you just split it between the ride cymbal and the snare, what you end up with on the ride cymbal is actually the classic jazz ride pattern. It's just the skip beat pattern with ghost notes in between. And the skip beat pattern, people play with the time of that a lot. But if you want sort of like a perfectly locked to the grid version of the jazz skip beat, it's in there in the paradiddle diddle. So you can see how bad my jazz playing is there. I mean, it's not even jazz. It's so bad. It sounds as bad as when a jazz drummer tries to play rock, actually, where it's like all hi-hats for some reason. Yeah, but so that's naturally where the accents seem to really lie there. It's the paradiddle diddle. It's either sort of the first 2 notes of the pattern are accented, or it's sort of your leading hand is accented. And when your leading hand is accented, you get that jazz beat that comes out of it. That's pretty different than the natural sound of the 6-stroke roll, which basically has, like the paradiddle diddle, a downbeat emphasis, but then it also has a little lead-in. It kind of rolls into the downbeat with an accent immediately before the downbeat. So that quarter note feels really like strong because you're like, it feels like it's falling off a cliff, and you really like land on that downbeat, and it feels really satisfying. So it's a totally different feel. I'll play the paradiddle diddle across some surfaces, and then I'll play the 6-stroke roll, and you'll hear what I mean. And the funny thing about that is that if you play the six stroke roll sort of the way it would be written on a piece of rudiment sheet music, as you can kind of even hear as I'm playing it, in many ways it's actually like an astonishingly non-versatile rudiment. And like that's like total heresy to a lot of these like really impressive players on Instagram who can just like rip stuff in a way that like I never could. It is like if you hear them talk about the six stroke roll, it's like they all have this like love affair with the six stroke roll, and you hear it all over everyone's playing. You can literally, like if I open Instagram and the videos are on mute, right? It's now such a common thing that I can see that someone is playing a six stroke roll in the shape of their hands on the kit. It's so common, and you instantly know, literally with the sound off, oh, this person's just like blasting six stroke rolls everywhere, right? And so what they mean when they say that it's versatile, they don't actually mean that it's versatile, right? They're midwits, right? They don't mean that it's versatile. They wouldn't even know what that means. What they mean when they say it's versatile is they mean they personally use it a lot, right? Whereas, like, the paradiddle diddle is actually great because of that heavy emphasis where it's like it's really weighted to the front of the beat. It means that like the downbeat feels really strong even at high tempos, and you're not stuffing doubles into like the middle of the beat. The doubles, right, the part that actually require you to kind of change your finger shape, isn't sandwiched in the middle of a beat. It's balanced at the end, which means that when you land on the next downbeat, it sort of like recharges you a little bit. And like you can hear as a player, you can hear where the downbeat is way easier. And so for me, it's like, the paradiddle diddle is just easier to move around and to actually get at higher speeds. Like I couldn't play that. Yeah, I would really struggle to play that with six stroke rolls. So a lot of people are just like really good at the six stroke rolls at the moment, right? That's kind of why they're popular, is just because everyone has sort of learned them within the last year, right? Or that's not fair. Like the last 3 years probably. For myself, it's like I feel like they were just not a big enough part of my vocabulary where like I was really moving them around the kit very much up until like, yeah, probably the last like year and a half or something like that. It just didn't factor into like my daily playing vocabulary very much. And then, I sort of heard people ripping this rudiment, and I kind of knew that it was a variant of that 7-stroke roll that you hear. But then, yeah, once I sort of confirmed that people were in fact playing this particular sticking, I was like, okay, well, I'll practice it with the kind of traditional sticking that you're supposed to use. And then it got faster, and it's still getting faster now for me. But yeah, it's like totally overtaken things. And the funny thing about this is that, again, if you didn't, I kind of got sidetracked from this point, but if you just removed the sticking from the equation and you just looked at that accent pattern, right? If you took out the ghost notes, the pattern you'd be left with is just dun, da-gun, da-gun, da-gun. You would just be left with 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the accented hits in the six-stroke roll. The really funny part about this is like you could just play this as single strokes. In fact, in a lot of the classic pop songs where that extra note is added on the end to make it a 7-stroke, I'm pretty confident that probably a lot of those players actually did play it as single strokes, and they just accented those notes, right? And so this is the funny thing about so much of like Instagram playing, is that you could basically play 80% of the stuff that people are playing as just single stroke rolls, and instead they're playing these immensely complex rudiments. And the funny thing is, when Vinny, to bring him up again, when Vinny Colaiuta plays something really hard, and when you can hear that he's pulling out all the stops in his playing, you know that it really is like achieving a specific aesthetic effect. There's no such guarantee when you're looking at these Instagram drummers. It's like you basically close your eyes and you listen and you're like, a lot of this could just be like single stroke rolls with a really complicated accent pattern. And there's no reason that their hands are flying around in this totally crazy way. Like their mobility across the kit isn't actually good enough to like justify that they're overcomplicating things with these rudiments. And so again, I'll just play for you the 6-stroke roll accent pattern just as singles. And what you'll hear is, it's pretty much identical. You can even kind of hear in that, like, it's up to speed, but I've practiced the 6-stroke roll so much that like I've corrupted my own brain from like having the ability to actually do that. It's like I've basically made it so that if I play it as singles, which is a fundamentally easier way to play it, I'm actually like slightly worse at it. God, I like have really wound myself up in the wires here. Give me a second to move this to the other side. There we go. So yeah, it's an interesting thing, right? Because it's even, again, like, I'm not at the level of a David Cola, even close, or any of these really flashy players in terms of my ability to do that kind of stuff. But it's just bizarre to me because it's like, what is the context in which they're playing this stuff? I just don't know. I guess in some ways it basically just serves as an online resume, right? You get to basically point to your Instagram account and you say like, hey, I can play all of this crazy shit, right? So there's a certain value to that, I guess. But, I don't know. I just think there's more interesting applications. And, for me, it's like, it's even a little like confusing and like disappointing when I start to hear some of these like lick-based soloing strategies come out in my own playing. That's why I wanted to solo a little bit at the start of this, was I felt like I've been, playing around with some ideas over the course of streaming, and then I wanted to try to concretize some of them in a way that actually I thought I was satisfied with how it sounded, and where it was still improvisatory, right? The last thing I want is to be in a place where I'm just like absolutely destroying these like licks that are just like I'm just like basically on rails playing these things, and it's improvised in the sense of like I'm successfully basically transitioning between different licks and coming up with ways to string them together. It's like, no, I want to be like actually improvisatory if I'm soloing, and I don't know. I think there's ways to play really weird combinations of singles and doubles in a slightly more like fusiony fashion that's improvised, where you can still play blazing fast, you can still play linear patterns, but it at least brings you on more of a sort of dramatic journey or something like that, and can hold your attention for more than 45 seconds at a time. You know, Again, part of this is like, is there a factor here of like the really flashy drumming is just a skill set thing that you can learn? Clearly, because a lot of the people who do spend most of their days making content with that kind of playing in it, they can also hold down a really great groove, and they clearly are educated in other ways of playing beyond that. But, you know, it has a little bit of the kind of macho thing that weirdly is in like a lot of fusion and in a lot of jazz and stuff like that, where it's less about like creating something that's actually going to stick with you, and it's more about this momentary challenge of like, hey, what do you got? And then they go, oh yeah, well, this is what I've got. And it's this trading, little solo ideas and little licks like back and forth, when the reality is like, just read the stick control book and then learn to play it on both your hands and your feet, and like you'll have a better musical vocabulary than like 99% of other musicians anyway. Like, why do you think again, this camera's on my little music stand that has all of my drum books on it. Why do you think I'm working my way through all these books? Is because like I would rather learn systems, right? Systems for developing creative playing and stuff like that, rather than just learning like individual little equations, right, that I can throw in where I go, oh, I know that I can play a six-stroke roll at 185 BPM. So if I'm playing an arrangement that's under that tempo, I can just throw six-stroke rolls all over the place. I have like less interest in that. So I'm gonna now actually shut up, and I'm gonna maybe solo a little bit more, and then I think the first song I want to play is "Ghost of Perdition" by Opeth, which is one of my like most listened to songs at the moment, off of one of my most listened to albums at the moment, by the way. I've been listening to that album, Ghost Reveries, like crazy, and it's the opening track. It's the one that famously has almost like a jump scare style opening. Amazing album, and a hell of a way to open that album too. So yeah, I'm gonna try to do a little bit more of like some more tasteful soloing, try to model my own good behavior that I've been talking about here. And then I think I'm going to go into Ghost of Perdition by Opeth. So here we go. some interesting stuff in there. Also some not so interesting stuff. And some stuff I still need to work on. But we're doing it live, baby. Okay. So, on to Ghost of Perdition. There are some weird parts in here. I've practiced this song enough, though. I'm pretty confident I have the majority of it down. There's one very hairy fill within the last couple minutes of the song, and if I mess it up, you will immediately know because I'm going to glare into the camera because I've practiced it so many times. That's the only real spot that gives me consistent trouble. So I'm aware of it, so hopefully that means when the time comes I can execute on it. But here we go. Ghost of Perdition, Opeth. two really hard fills. Whoops. Ooh-wee. Whoa, sorry. Sticks are just like clacking against everything. Sorry. Damn. So that was really quite good. I'm pretty happy with that. Funny thing is the part I was talking about that I assumed was going to be a problem wasn't a problem. Which is transitioning out of that fast double bass, screamy, very heavy section. Goes to perdition. That part. There's like a weird measure there. I wish I knew how the band members were counting that, or how it was like tabbed out in a piece of sheet music when they were demoing that song. Because for me, it's just like a weird bar of like 11 followed by like a weird bar of 3 or something like that. I mean, it's not convenient to count. But I feel like I have to count it because I can't like intuitively feel it. So I need to physically in my head, like as I'm playing, I need to be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But whatever. That part turned out to be basically fine. The part that snuck up on me was that weird transition back into the soaring section at the end. Yeah, not ideal there. Which is that part where there's a ton of dissonance in it, if I remember correctly, or at the very least the part for guitar and bass is just very weird sounding. And then it on that downbeat, it sort of immediately transitions back into that big choral part at the end. But the drum part is like a weird combination of the part you played already, transitioning into the very heavy section, along with just like some new fills and weird stuff. See, even like just playing it alone, I'm like messing it up because I feel like it's longer than it actually is. I think I can get it though. tough. It doesn't. It's very like unnatural to go back into like a really quick triplet thing like that. Dun 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 dun. And particularly to get the feel right, because it has such a good feel on the record. Like you can really hear that he's playing ghost notes on the snare in between the hi-hat barks, and that he's really crescendoing. Like the roll is crescendoing. It's not just like this. I'll play it sort of like the version with no dynamics and then the version that kind of crescendos, so you can hear what I mean. God, it's hard. It's just like not rushing it. Ugh, crazy. It's crazy how like that one thing can sneak up on you in that way. Like the rest of the song, I'm like pretty much comfortable with at this point. Like I've been playing it for, just playing it sort of on and off for long enough that it's pretty much I feel happy with it. But man, just like something can really come up and just grab you in that way. It's crazy. There's always something in these like difficult arrangements that seemingly you can sort of forget about, or that you're kind of confused by. God, I have really like wound my in-ear monitors around the drum throne here. I like don't know how I've done this. How have I done this? I think I have to spin around completely in order to wait, but then I need to do this with the microphone. Oh God. I think that actually did it. Wow. Gotta be a better way to do that. Oh, and this actually still hasn't fixed it. This might have made it worse. Wow. Amazing. Wait a second. Aha. I've done it. Yeah. Well, the good thing is that there's a fast part in that that fast double bass part is really great. So my feet feel pretty good. I might try the other Opeth song that has some fast feet in it then, which is the Leper Affinity. I like the Opeth opening tracks. They're always like really energetic and really good, particularly in their kind of death metal period. And so this is the opener on Blackwater Park. I really like this song. I haven't played it in ages, but I think I have it pretty much committed to memory. So any mistakes should not be too unbearable to witness. So let's try for the Leper Affinity. Oh, the magic of technology. Sometimes it just stops playing things. Uh, Interesting. I don't know why that happened. Let's just try it again. We'll just try it again. This has kind of a weird, again, another sort of jump scare opening here. So I might not come in at exactly the right second, but I'll catch up to it faster. I had to mess with the volume there, so. Sorry, not going to listen to the piano outro there. And of course, the problem with all these songs is that they're slightly depressing anyway. So the second I'm not actually hitting an instrument, I'm like, God, this is sad. It puts me in a bad mood. Um, oh man, that was okay. There's a couple of parts there that trip me up that I wasn't necessarily expecting. Um, I guess the primary one is there's a part where I felt myself rushing. Um, well, and of course the weird tom part is really odd because like just the feel of it is really weird, and then that transitions into kind of like that fast drum fill. So like it's a part where your time needs to be really spot on, and it's a weird feeling spot anyway, and then you need to nail it because it goes right into like that little drum fill that's kind of a feature for like a half a second there. Of course, I also made that more complicated on myself. I'm now realizing because he doesn't actually hit a cymbal. He doesn't hit any cymbals in that drum fill on the record. He just goes to the toms, which would be on most kits and probably on his kit would be a much shorter distance to go. So maybe I actually just made that more difficult on myself than I needed. Because I played this. And he doesn't play that. I think he plays this. Yeah, I do need to think about that version where I'm reaching for the cymbals. I need to actively think about it a little bit more. I thought you were perfect. Well, that's very flattering. Uh, that's very flattering, but yeah. Okay. So we've just had two very demonic songs. Let's go to something fun. Let's go to like some Megadeth or something. Some fast, classic Megadeth. Yeah. God, that one's fun. Oh man, wow. Oh yeah, that one's a lot of fun. Um, let's see here. I mean, not a revelation there that one is fun. It's only like, you know, one of the most classic thrash metal tracks of all time, but it is it requires a lot of discipline of you. Like the funny part about all of the albums that Nick Menza's on is like he really was like a prediction of the era that was to come in metal music, because you know, none of the classic Megadeth albums that he's on have any sort of time correction or anything on them, obviously. But you know, they are perfect sounding. You know, you can listen to the original albums, you can listen to the remasters. To me, it almost like doesn't matter. What you hear is that Nick Menza is like perfect. You know, his playing is like, that's just like his natural playing, his natural drum sound. He has no digital assistance, right? There was no digital assistance at this time. And what you hear is someone who is just playing these parts like perfectly. I gotta figure out this chord situation here, man. um, um, yeah, I mean, and the funny thing is, like, that song, I feel like that song, it almost doesn't even have drum fills. You know what I mean? It just has like choreographed transitions, right? Like nothing in that song that you would classify as a fill is just like some thing he improved. It's like a totally, you know, like even at the beginning of Dave's guitar solo, you know, there's a set of quads, you know, two on the hands and two on the feet, in seemingly like a random measure. You know what I mean? Like it's not at the beginning of a phrase of the solo or anything. It's just like stuck kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it's like perfect. It feels like it amps the energy up so high. It makes the solo so exciting. And so it's like, you know, compare that to like, you know, Opeth. You know, the funny thing about Opeth is, you know, the guy who was in Opeth up until 5 minutes ago, right? Martin Axelrod, you know, he was taking over for Martin Lopez, who is one of my favorite players ever. I mean, I think hugely underrated. Um, but you know, those songs are so like long and languishing, and they have so many parts to them, and it's like, you know, you hear some of these drum fills, and it really is like a lot of them are sort of interchangeable, and even when you hear Axe play Lopez's parts, you know, like Ghost of Perdition, when you go to like the live DVD that has a recording of it, you know, he's just like messing around with stuff, and it sounds like basically just as good as the album, right? Even though like he's playing meaningfully different stuff, he's throwing in fills in like different spots. The fills that are in the same spots are like not the same fills most of the time, unless they're like really tightly choreographed fills that are like transitions from one section to the next, right? Most of them are just whatever he kind of wants to play. Everything sounds great, right? It's a band that has had two really amazing players in it. So both of them, they have great instincts for what they're playing live. So it always sounds like it fits. Um, but it changes. It's clearly like the kind of thing where a lot of those fills are changing night to night. There's a kind of jazz quality to it where these things are somewhat improvised or whatever. Those Nick Menza thrash albums, man, nah. No, it's like those are choreographed. Those are like dance moves. Like he is in the exact place he means to be at the exact time he means to be. Um, and I don't know. It's interesting. It's it's really like kind of amazing to listen to some of those tracks and be like, wow, like everything is played with like 100% intent. There's no, faffing about, as as one might say. Um, and Yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Um, Even like the other thrash players of the period, like Lars. Lars is famous for he never plays the same song twice, seemingly, right? He's, you know, just whatever comes into his head at the moment is seemingly what Lars plays. So it's not like this was like some trait of thrash metal. It's like you had players who had this jazzier approach of just like, yeah, whatever I feel like playing in the moment, that's what I'm going to play. And Menza just was not that guy. He was just athletically doing the perfect drum part, right? He wanted the drum parts to just be perfect, clearly. Or else you wouldn't impose that level of discipline on yourself. You know what I mean? You would play around more or something. And he was not playing around. So that's kind of interesting. Um, what else can we play here that's maybe in the same? Well, actually, okay. So speaking of Metallica, um, I wanted to play either Blackened or Master of Puppets. Blackened because it's my favorite Metallica song. Master of Puppets because Master of Puppets is sort of in the zeitgeist right now because of that goddamn Stranger Things episode. Um, a show I refuse to watch. Just looks bad at this point. Honestly, I just refuse. As with almost everything on streaming at this point, it just sort of looks really really bad. Um, yeah, let's go with Master Puppets. Now, the funny thing about Master Puppets, you're gonna hear me do this. I can't help myself but do this when I play. The sort of pretty middle section, I have always kind of disliked the drums there. They sound too plodding, too heavy. It sounds way too much like a heavy metal player trying to play in a soft ballad context. It's just too, knuckle dragger. It's like just this big, chunky hi hat, and this beautiful guitar line over top of it. And then the hi hats are just this like, it's just the wrong sound. So you're going to hear me mess around with that. But um, other than that, nothing particularly weird that I'm changing, I think. Maybe adding some double bass in here and there, but that's about it. Yeah, let's do Master Puppets. Maybe we'll do Blackened too. Maybe I'll just transition into Blackened. Oh, as you can tell by the intro there, still some, after all these years, still some impatience with that intro. I'm just like so ready to kick into the song every time I play something like Master of Puppets that I just forget what I actually need to play to start with. It would seem. Um, okay, so cool. Been going for a while here. Might play Blackened. Stick with the Metallica. Blackened, weirdly, I think I know Blackened better than I know Master Puppets. Crazily. Actually, also, wait a second here. Let me also. There we go. So it's less looks like Abu Ghraib in here. There we go. Perfect. There we go. Cool. Yeah. Let's see. What else do I have on my list here besides other Metallica? I have I have Slaughter the Soul again, which is the kind of fast song that I played last week. A couple others. I have a Blind Guardian song. I'm actually really annoyed. So Blind Guardian, as I've said in previous streams, is probably my favorite band. If not, they're definitely one of. And they have a new album out, and I like pre-ordered a version of it that has all of the bonus tracks and like extra goodies on it. And of course, it's like an import from Germany. So it's been like a hot minute since the new Blind Guardian album came out, and like I just refuse to listen to it because I want to listen to it on the CD, you know, as we've discussed on this program before. I'm a bit of like a luddite in the sense that like I think like music technology should have basically stopped with the CD, right? I can't make myself listen to like my favorite band's album just like unceremoniously on like a streaming service. I'm not gonna do that. So I'm annoyed because like I wanna like play some new Blind Guardian or something, but I can't make myself listen to the album until I have it physically on my person, um, which I know is ridiculous, but I just refuse to do it. Um, so I do have an old Blind Guardian song though on, so that's a fun one. That's like a fast, you know, amped up song. So maybe I'll finish out here with a couple amped up songs. Maybe I'll go straight from I'll do Blackened in no particular order. Maybe I'll do Blackened, I'll do Slaughter of the Soul, and I'll do the Blind Guardian song. Let's actually start with the Blind Guardian song. This is I'm Alive, which is from Imaginations from the Other Side, which is filled with just like heavy, fast songs. That whole album is just like that. So let's see how loud this is, since I don't want to just like shock myself again as I've been doing with some of these other songs. I think that's the correct volume for that. Yeah, I'll start with that, and then maybe I'll go to either Blackened or Slaughter the Soul after that. You'll be able to tell if it's Metallica or not by the way that everything sounds. So don't worry too much about not knowing what the song is after the Blind Guardian one. I might just go straight through and not talk, so I don't waste any time here. I did promise that this would be more playing, less talking. So yeah, here we go. Oh, I'm gonna finish out with Slaughter the Soul. That one was a little rough. The I hate to say, the they the drumless track of that had like Jason's bass mixed in way up, and I was actually like a little distracted by that, to be completely honest with you. The famous missing Jason's bass actually threw me off a little bit. I'm not gonna blame it on that though. That was just, that was not as tight as it could have been. That's something to maybe practice for the future too. It has been a minute since I played that, so it kind of makes sense that it wasn't as tight as it could be. So, yeah, I love that song though. It's so weird too, because like, again, there's like a half a second of really fast double bass in it. It's like. It's just so fun. Oh my god. Okay, well, as you can see, I'm getting sweaty. So I'm gonna sign off with Slaughter the Soul here. This is gonna be another one where I need to like test the volume, because I think the original track is like weirdly quiet. So I don't want to like overcompensate and like blow my ears out or blow anyone else's ears out. So give me a second. Ooh-wee. Okay. Wait a minute. So I figured out the wire here. Just before I go, I want everyone to know this. I figured out the wire. So I have to turn this way, but I can't bring the mic with me this way, which means that I have to put the microphone on the floor. I have to turn this way. I have to change. I have to change the camera. Now I can pick up the microphone. So that's officially what the process is. I'm definitely not gonna remember that, but good enough for now, I guess. Cool. I actually didn't even get through my whole roster of things to play, but you know, couple good ones in there. At least a couple good sections to chop up for the old Instagram there or whatever. And those Opeth songs are fun. Maybe I'll try to have those like nailed. Maybe. Obviously, as you can tell from that section earlier, I really need to work on the last minute or two of Ghost of Perdition just to get that wacky fill down. That like isn't that complicated, but for some reason in the context of thinking of the part of the song it's in, I find it like weirdly difficult to execute. So maybe I'll try to like have that ready, or at least make some progress. Opeth is really growing on me. You know, it's funny. I like Opeth. I tried to do the Opeth thing for so long, and like it didn't click. And then it was interesting. It was a combination of, you know, people complain about either old Opeth or new Opeth, right? They don't like the new Opeth doesn't have growls. Some people really like it and think it's like a huge improvement. They've become more of sort of like a straightforward, like old school, almost prog rock band in some ways, with like a kind of 70s vibe. You know, I know that Michael is really into that era of music and is kind of a collector and stuff like that. So that's kind of what he's turned the band into. But it was really like in short progression. I first heard Still Life, the album Still Life, which is one of the old albums. And Still Life is maybe to this day still my favorite Opeth album. I'm not totally sure. And then shortly after that, I heard a couple of tracks from Heritage, which is the first of the new period Opeth albums where they've gotten a lot like jazzier and proggier, and there's no growled vocals or anything like that. And basically, like, there was something about hearing the combination of those two albums in pretty short succession where it was like, oh, I get this. And ever since then, I don't know if I've talked about this on stream at all, but I really like this idea of like whole world art, where it's the kind of art that basically, like, when you engage with it, you can basically like lose yourself in the entire world of this thing, and it feels like you're just existing in this world. You know, it's like, I think that's why people like, you know, Tolkien so much. I think that's why people like really long book series that never seem to end. There are certain movies that are really like this, like David Lynch films are like this, and even, you know, in terms of TV, Twin Peaks is like this, where it's a kind of whole universe show, and you feel like you can just live in the universe of Twin Peaks or something. And Opeth is one of these bands where it's like it's one of these bands where you can just live in those albums. You know, you look at the covers, and like the covers are so atmospheric, and they're so cool, and they're so interesting. And I mean, it's like you can just get lost in these things almost like for weeks, you know. And that's the great thing about albums too, is that even more so than movies or shows in some way, an album can really be your sort of constant companion. And so you really can like live in the universe of an Opeth album. And I think there was something about hearing Still Life and then Heritage. There was something about just the way those albums progress, or the sound of some of the tracks or something, where I was like, I just like all of Opeth. Like that was the like that was what clicked. I was like, wait a second, all of this is just great. And so yeah, like Opeth took a really long time to grow on me, but it grew. And I mean, Ghost Reveries, like I've had Ghost Reveries like in my car for what feels like maybe a year now or something like that, and it's just been like a constant companion. And it's like, man, you can just live in the world of Ghost Reveries. Like the Ghost Reveries CD, I don't even think has the name of the album on the cover. It's just like a painting or a picture or whatever. Like the title of the album and I think the band name maybe even is nowhere on the album, like on the front. It's really amazing. It's just like you can just live in that, you know. Uh, can you discuss the physical endurance that's required to be a heavy metal percussionist? Oh God. Well, some of this is weird because like I just like, even as I continue to lose weight and even as I continue to do more cardio and get more in shape and stuff like that, I just still sweat like crazy when I play. So some of this looks more exhausting than it probably is for the average drummer who's playing this stuff. Um, but like when I recently went to see At the Gates, you know, um, At the Gates, that was the band I just played. That was that last song that I played. And that's like all of At the Gates music. All of At the Gates music is like it's all this hyped up tempo polka beat thing where, your hi-hat is just going like max speed for like minutes at a time every single song, and like the snare pattern is just relentless, and there's a lot of sort of like slow jogging type double bass where it's not out of the realm of possibility in terms of speed for most double bass players, but you just are transitioning from these fast beats to then a kind of half-time variant of that same beat where everything's getting filled in with a slower pattern on the hands, and then everything is filled in on the feet. And I would say that, uh, he was Adrian, who's a wonderful drummer, uh, who I love. I love his playing so dearly, and I find it so impressive. And he's very, old school. Like he just sits in that tempo, for like a whole show. It's really impressive that he doesn't get lost or doesn't, yeah, that he's not losing his place in the music. I mean, it's really, I love his playing, and he was sweating like a pig by the end of the show, But then at the same time, like when we saw Megadeth, where there's a lot of beefy playing there. I mean, it's certainly not at the kind of max level of what Dirk as a drummer can play, but it's a lot of like hard hitting drums for an hour and 10 minutes or whatever. He like he looked like he could have gone and like ran a marathon after that or something like that. Like he didn't look winded at all. It didn't even look like there was a drop of sweat on him. Art, the guy in Lamb of God, he was a little sweaty at the end of that show. He looked a little like he had really exercised. I don't know. I think the main physical endurance challenges for most heavy metal are that there's really a minimum requirement for the amount of noise you're generating in most contexts. And the minimum is loud, right? Um, you know, this is one thing that I can't really emulate particularly well on this kit, but if I was on an acoustic kit, you would see, is that, um, to get the right sound out of a snare drum for most heavy metal records, you need to be playing every snare hit as a rim shot. Every snare hit the stick needs to kind of whack into the rim as well as the drum head. You can't just sort of be like a classical orchestral snare drummer and just play the head of the drum, you need to hit the head of the drum and then also the rim, right? And that's kind of difficult to replicate on this kit, because on this kit it's more just like if I hit it hard enough, it makes the maximum velocity snare sound. So in some ways that's actually kind of like a relief on me. It's a little bit easier in some ways, but yeah, there's a minimum requirement of sort of the brutality and force that you need to approach the instrument with in order to get the appropriate level of noise out of it. And basically that is combined with a kind of note density that I think is probably only comparable to jazz. So a lot of the most sort of like physically difficult metal playing is stuff where basically the note density of how much is going on the drums in a given measure is comparable only to, some really out there macho balls out, kind of fusion jazz or something like that, where it's really dense music. There's a lot of notes flying past you. There's a lot of different patterns and stuff like that. And then the difference is that there is such an emphasis on noise generation and the ability to keep like a good loud sound on the drums, that so much of the playing has been basically modified to fit into single stroke rolls, because single stroke rolls are kind of the easiest way to achieve maximum volume, right? And so basically what you have is a situation where it's a lot of very repetitive motion, right? Because you're not necessarily digging into a lot of like rudimental playing. You're doing a lot of single strokes and you're doing maybe a lot of doubles. But beyond that, you're not like activating like your little finger muscles that a jazz player would or something. It's all kind of like your hand, your wrist, your arm, your trunk, all of these things. And then it's combined with pretty high note density that's comparable to some really difficult fully instrumental music, And the exceptions to that, that they're exceptions, right? It's like the really slow Black Sabbath songs. It's like, okay, there's not a lot of note density in Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath, right? But there is a lot of note density in Symptom of the Universe by Black Sabbath. There's a lot of note density in War Pigs. There's a hell of a lot of note density in Rat Salad, And so yeah, it's high note density music combined with basically adapting the techniques of the drums to be hyper repetitive, and also a lot of four limb movement. Like a rock drummer can get away with not really having a very active hi-hat foot. Just pressing away down here. You don't necessarily need to do that if you're in a rock context or whatever. Metal, there's enough double bass going on that oftentimes you are talking about four-way coordination going on. Again, the only comparable situation on the drums would be jazz, where they're using the hi-hat oftentimes really like creatively in the context of like beats and patterns. But even then, you can learn to really lightly feather, the hi-hat pedal in a way where you're intentionally not using a lot of muscle. But yeah, for heavy metal, it's like if you want to get a good sound out of the drums, even if you are, triggering, even if you are using some kind of a sampling method on a live acoustic drum kit, even in that case, you still need to hit loudly and consistently in order to get the right sound out of the instrument. And, just thinking of like a fast double bass pattern, right, with slow hands on top of it, right? that's sextuplets, and that's if you were to remove one foot, that's in a 2-beat span, right? You have each foot individually doing this. And in order to get a sound that's actually going to sound properly sort of consistent, there really can't be any like volume variation between those 6 or 7 hits on the bass drum. They need to really be even, and they need to be loud. They need to sound beefy. And so you really are learning how to constantly be doing like maximum limb motion, and of course, some of my favorite players are guys who break these rules, right? But it's sort of like you have to learn the rules in order to break them. Eloy's a great example of this. He has tons of quiet stuff in his playing, tons of ghost notes and weird stuff. His insane, triplet thing that he does at the end of the song Isolation, between like the China cymbal and the snare, where it's this offbeat triplet accent thing with double bass underneath it. There are actually quiets and louds there. There are ghost notes on the snare. There are accents on the snare. There's a quiet like offbeat that is kind of played when you watch him play it live, played as kind of an upstroke. And then there's a downstroke, which is hitting off of the quarter note, right? It's actually not on the beat. And so that's like, again, to bring him up again, that's like the kind of thing that like Vinnie Colaiuta would play, right? That's something that some of the great like heritage players, the great technicians, some of the most talented people who have ever been on this instrument would play. But you also would never argue that the ultimate aesthetic effect of what Eloy is playing there is that he's playing something that ultimately is quiet, right? There are little notes on the snare. Right? So he's breaking this rule of like everything has to be loud. And I put ghost notes all over the place when I'm playing a basic metal beat, even with, straight double bass under it. I put ghost notes, I put things to try to make things more tasteful and fill things out that are quiet and are non-accented all the time. You would never say that the ultimate aesthetic effect is that these are, quiet, placid drums, right? At the end of the day, even with all of the quiet nuances in that part that Eloy plays, the end result is still this. It's still this, just flurry of phenomenally loud stuff that's just flying past you at 1,000,000 miles an hour. And again, in a way that's maybe only comparable to some of the really out there, busy, experimental jazz music or something like that. With the added difficulty of the fact that just the volume level has to be so much higher than in a jazz setting. So that's the physical endurance thing. It is fundamentally different from a lot of other sort of genres of playing, which is why, like guitarists and like vocalists, there are so many guys who really are sort of dedicated metal guys. You don't see them doing like session tracks for pop artists or something like that, is because it really is a particular skill set. Now, the disadvantage of that is that it kind of, as an art form or as a craft, gets ghettoized, right? Where it's like, you're a good metal drummer. You're not a good, like, drummer. Right? In the way that, like, Gene Hoglan, who's a master on this instrument and who's on, like, all of the legendary early extreme metal albums or whatever, there's a whole group of people that, will never even think of him in the same category of, like, the great players. Like, people will not think of Gene Hoglan when they think of great players. They will think of Tony Williams. or something like that. Even though I would say that basically, Tony Williams does things all the time that Gene Hoglan can't do. Gene Hoglan does things all the times that Tony Williams couldn't have done while Tony Williams was alive. Right? Right? So it's like these are unique skill sets, and the important thing of someone like Eloy, I was sort of shitting on Instagram earlier for being bad for music, but the advantage of having some of these great innovative metal players, someone like Eloy, for instance, being on Instagram constantly showing off his playing, is basically that actually helps to sort of get metal players out of the ghetto a little bit, right? Where it's basically like there are lots of people who see that now and are like, wow, like this person is playing at the level of like Vinnie Colaiuta or, Dave Weckl or something like that. Like this is a person who's at that level of talent, but is also able to just smash this instrument as hard as humanly possible, right? And in some ways that does actually make him more talented than someone who's able to really calmly just sit there, like a Dennis Chambers or something like that, who's blasting out chops but is putting like no physicality behind it at all, where he's just sitting back there chewing his gum going like, just like emotionlessly just like blasting with nothing beyond basically like his wrist being involved in the striking process. It's almost more impressive that like Eloy can play that kind of shit, and it's just like with the intensity of like, like a living, like a demon come to life or something like that, right? It almost makes him more impressive. And so yeah, that's the positive aspect of it, is that basically I feel like some people like Eloy have really actually trailblazed things in a way for me to be able to even do something like this stream without feeling really weird about it. Because I think that a lot of the assumptions for many years were that basically like, if you were a guy in a metal band, it was almost like you weren't even really a musician. You were just a guy who sort of wanted to be in a band, and you were sort of like, the bassist in a lot of bar bands or whatever, which is like maybe you didn't want to be the bassist, but you sort of ended up being the bassist or whatever. And that was sort of the assumption about all sorts of metal musicians, is like they didn't actually care about their instruments. They didn't care about if they could play or virtuosity. They just wanted to be in a band. They wanted to be loud, right? They wanted to play shows, and that was it. And I think the advantage of some of these great metal guys now being very visible through social media is that basically like, it's less weird for me to now come on here, and talk about Vinnie Colaiuta, right, who is one of my favorite players in the world, and to be able to talk about them in the same breath as the stuff that I'm listening to and the stuff that I think is compelling music, and to interrelate things and to have a kind of art critical and art historical experience with this that's like at an intellectual level, right? Because basically like there's less of this understanding that like, every guy who picks up the sticks in a metal band is just Lars Ulrich in 1989 in his lycra workout pants, licking his lips and with his weird accent, and he's just gonna play like whatever comes into his head, and it might sound like garbage and whatever. And that's a conversation for a different time, because I will actually defend Lars to the death. But it's got to be said that he really has added to the presumptions about what it means if you're the drummer in a band like that, which is that you're just like some meathead guy or whatever. And it's like, again, listen to some of those beats on Ghost of Perdition and tell me that there's no subtlety, tell me that there's no depth to the playing there, right? Basically you play it straight through as a balls to the wall 6/8 heavy metal thing, and then you immediately transition into a metallic version of like a shuffle. And the verses of Ghost of Perdition trade between these two things. They trade between a straight ahead kind of rock metal double bass thing, and then basically retaining the double bass, but then bringing it into the mode of like a classic shuffle on the hands, complete with ghost notes, complete with sort of weird offbeat accents, right? Like, tell me that this isn't something that like Jeff Porcaro might have played. There's all sorts of like really interesting rhythmic ideas just in like that first minute or two of that song. And again, like that's not just me, I could play a super metal version of that where, like and they could have played that way on the album where, there's like the double bass pattern is in like double time. It's not even like dun 2 3 4 5 6 ducka 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 ducka. They could have played it so that it was right. They could have gone for that, and then the hands over top of that would have had to be super simplified. It would have had to sound like. And there would have been no shuffle in the second half, in the back half of the beat or whatever. But they didn't. Even the sort of super heavy metal thing has like interesting fills. It has weird drags on the snare and on the toms. Again, just in like a couple measures of that song, some really, really interesting rhythmic ideas, a lot of subtlety to the playing. There's ghost notes, there's kind of cool accent patterns, interesting uses of like hurtas, as rudiments, sort of slowed down in a way where they feel very, they like immediately call your attention to the drums. I mean, they really like stand out when he plays those hurta fills at different points in those verses. I simply just don't think that that is any less interesting than, you know, some of these things that some of these more um, you know, heritage based bands or something like that. Uh, I just don't think that that's any less interesting. And the songs are complex and the songs are interesting, and they do require physical stamina because you also need to really play with intent. That's the thing about breaking the rule about everything always being loud, is that part of the reason that it still sounds good when a good metal player plays with subtlety is because, like, they actually really are not coming at it with a free jazz mindset. This is actually the way in which it is meaningfully different as an art form, is that, um, you know, if you're not sure what you're playing, a single moment of hesitation will come through, right? As anyone who's watched these streams for long enough can attest, right? It's like, if I'm just trying out an idea, half the time it's like the first two times I go for it, it like sounds sloppy and weird, and then I sort of get it. And it's because, like, if you're just trying stuff out up there, you know, it's not going to sound good. you know, you really do need to have real intentionality, and you need to choreograph your moves in a way that mean that whatever you're playing still has a really solid pocket to it, and where you are not slipping in your time. Like, things cannot get too greasy and fluid, right? Right? Like, you can't just be in your own little space. It's like, like, I don't really think there are many great metal drummers at all who, like, have a lot of substances before they go on stage. I particularly don't think that there are many guys who are, like, smoking weed when they get up there, right? And, a guy like, Steve Jordan, who plays with, like, John Mayer, and who was one of the guys who played some of those classic Blues Brothers tracks and stuff like that. Half the time, he's got this amazing groove, and half the time you look at his eyes and, like, his eyes are, like, totally bloodshot, right? But why is that? Is because he's playing something like, Waiting on the World to Change by John Mayer, right? Which is really improved by the kind of relaxation that a substance would give him in that context. He's playing, like, this kind of stuff for most of his career. That's pretty much Waiting on the World to Change by John Mayer, with a couple mess ups there, because I couldn't remember. There's, like, a weird kind of vamp solo section that goes into a shuffle, but I think, like, the shuffle's only implied. Like, he's not even playing that fast skip beat shuffle thing of, like, because like the groove is just like too busy. Like I think he's literally, even during this implied shuffle section that's a little bit more jazzier and instrumental and has a busier groove feel to it, he's still just back there like. And of course, listen to Steve Jordan play it. It like sounds perfect and like amazing, right? It sounds 100 million times better than what I just did. But it's Waiting on the World to Change by John Mayer. Like, me and all my friends, we all misunderstood. No way we stand for nothing. No way we ever could. It's like okay. You know what's not the drum beat in Waiting on the World to Change? Me and all my friends. That's not it. Right? That might be something where he would not be imbibing in any substances before going out on stage in that scenario, right? So I mean that's kind of the starter on where the difficulties are of being a metal player. Again, the additional difficulty here is, I mean, I'm actually not particularly physically exhausted at that point. It's just like, even as I continue to get healthier and lose weight and feel better and I'm less winded doing all sorts of other exercises, I just sweat so much when I play, and I don't really know why. Because I feel like I could go to the gym right now. I could do another 45 minutes of cardio or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it wouldn't actually be a huge deal. I just sweat. I don't know why. So part of this is just that I look more exhausted than I am, which is, again, a lot of black. um, you know, uh, I had the brilliant idea of like, oh, let's have like a towel of some kind before I start the stream. It was like, it turned out to be wise. I'm gonna do that going forward, I think. But yeah. So hopefully this was a satisfying stream. This was a greater portion of the stream today was playing. I'd like to balance it a little bit more in that direction still going forward, because again, I want to get some good takes of stuff so that I can chop some of it up, throw it on Instagram, stuff like that. I don't see what the utility is in like making separate recordings for Instagram, because what I want to really be putting my effort into is this. I want this to be fun. I want this to be good. Preferably, I would like this to grow. You know what I mean? But that's almost like a nice side effect if it happens. It's a cough in the background. But yeah, you know, I think I want to just get good takes of things to chop up on Instagram from the stream. You know what I mean? I don't want to do separate recordings for Instagram. I don't like Instagram enough to be spending that much goddamn time on it. You know what I mean? So yeah, this was fun. And I guess I'll see you next week. I think probably same bat time, same bat channel. Maybe not. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? Life's an adventure. Fucking God Save the Queen. We're all on one big roller coaster ride here. But yeah, pretty sure it'll be the same schedule for next week. Maybe I'll do one before then. These are fun, and I sort of skipped last week because I wasn't feeling better. Wasn't feeling so good that I thought I could like play very well. So I'm kind of itching to get back into it. It was fun. The King. I guess it is God Save the King, right? It's the Queen is dead. God Save the King. Which is so sad. For reasons I won't get into. I'm not, particularly attached to these weirdos across the Atlantic Ocean, but yeah, she was kind of an institution unto herself, wasn't she? But yeah. God save Britain. God save my calf muscles. There's a lot of double bass today, guys. And yeah, see you all soon. And thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. See you soon.